In the United States, March is designated as Women's History Month. It's a time to reflect on the advancements women have made in all areas of society. It's also a time to honor the unsung heroes, as well as the trailblazers who led the way to change. And while gains continue to be made, many say more progress is needed for women to close the gender gap. Tonight's live broadcast and live stream of Insights on PBS Hawaii start now.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Olena Hugh. For centuries, women's contributions to America's national narrative were overlooked. In fact, it wasn't until 1980 when President Jimmy Carter issued the first presidential proclamation declaring a week in March as National Women's History Week. After heavy lobbying to Congress, the celebration was expanded to the entire month in 1987. It's a time to remember the sacrifices made by women for a more inclusive society. It's also a time to honor the extraordinary achievements of American women. And as women continue to break the glass ceiling, more work needs to be done. Tonight, a candid conversation about gender equality and if it's elusive. We look forward to your participation in tonight's show. You can email or call in with your questions. You'll find a live stream of this program at pbshawaii.org and the PBS Hawaii Facebook page. Now to our guests. Tanya Smith Johnson is the Policy Director at Healthy Mothers, Healthy Babies Coalition of Hawaii. The nonprofit is part of a national network of organizations working to improve maternal, child, and family health. Tanya has a bachelor's degree in biology and a master's in medical science. She's a Navy Hospital Corpsman veteran, a certified midwife, and the mother of 6 children. Colleen Mcaluney is the director of the Patsy Mink Center for Business and Leadership. It's the only women's business center in Hawaii and is designed to assist women to become successful entrepreneurs and leaders. She is a graduate of Pepperdine University and enjoys hiking, traveling, and searching for pop-up restaurants and food trucks. Youngchee Overly is the Public Policy Chair for the American Association of University Women of Hawaii. The group's mission is to help fight for fair pay and economic opportunity for women. She has more than 3 decades of experience at IBM in software development, sales, and marketing. Youngchee loves snorkeling, Korean dramas, and is happy to translate BTS lyrics for friends. And ʻIhilani Lasconia is a Native Hawaiian activist and artist from Waimanalo. She's currently a graduate student at the University of Hawaii at Mānoa, working towards a master's degree in education administration. Part of her studies include investigating the politics of free speech and its unique impact on Indigenous peoples in higher education. Thank you all for joining us this evening, and it is my honor to facilitate the conversation tonight. I wanted to start off first maybe with a little bit of an icebreaker, asking each of the ladies this evening, starting with Tanya, to talk about one woman that has inspired you in your career.
Wow, one woman who's inspired me in my career. To be honest with you, I would say my mother. My mother came from really humble beginnings. She is the reason why I mother the way I do. She's the reason why I wanted to be someone who took care of mothers, birthing people, and children. She had a hard upbringing, but with that, she taught me the beauty in nurturing and nourishing people, the beauty in caring for the underdog, caring for those who are in the margins, speaking for those who go unseen and unheard. So yeah, I would say her, and she's the reason pretty much why I do everything that I do.
Wonderful, thank you. And ʻIhilani, how about you?
For me, it would be the Native Hawaiian scholar, activist, and poet, and the late Kumuhanani K. Trask. I think in part of my graduate work, it's been to work on a biography in her honor. So learning about all of the amazing things that she did and the legacy that she left for not just Native Hawaiian women, but all women and people is something that's been really inspiring for me and something that I hope to build off of. This amazing
Wonderful.
legacy.
And Youngchee, how about you?
It'd have to be an executive that I was working for when I was 25. I felt harassed at work, gender harassment. So I went straight to her and reported it, and she took action. So when I became a manager, I went back to her, asking her to become my mentor. And she said, as a manager, you listen first, and then you figure out how to support, and then you lead as needed. And that lesson has been with me all along. So it'll have to be Lynn Watkins.
And Colleen?
Yeah, mine would have to be in my earlier career too. When I was in retail, I had a store manager that probably was the most influential for me. It had to do with how she dealt with people, with her staff, with her team. And I learned quite a bit from her as a direct, transparent communicator who was very firm, but she also was very fair. And she would listen, and then she would act. And I think that she built a very strong team around her who supported her 100%. And it was just her, just the way she honored them, but also led them, was an amazing example to me in my growth. And I still speak to her to this day. It's fantastic. I really.
Wonderful. And I also want to remind our viewers that if you have any comments or questions for our panel tonight, you may call. You can also leave a Facebook message, and you can also email us as well. We'll be happy to include you in the conversation. Now, ʻIhilani, coming from a Native Hawaiian background, we just heard from all the other ladies talking about leaders, and you also mentioned a great leader. What do you think you've learned from some of these Native Hawaiian leaders that you've been researching, as you're getting your master's?
That's a great question. Thank you so much. And I think an overarching thing I've learned from these amazing wahine, such as Kumuhanani K. Trask, Emma Navahi, Nahi Ana Ana, and Kahumanu. And I won't be the first person to ever say this, but wahine have a place in the struggle. And that when thinking about efforts towards decolonization or deoccupation, wahine have always been at the forefront of these struggles, and finding out what our kuleana or responsibility is as wahine has been something that I'm really thinking about now in my graduate work. Something that these women also remind me of is that being involved in these struggles, you have to bring a lot of love and joy into it as well. So trying to not take myself too seriously, but understanding that there's joy in these moments of work and organizing, although it can be really difficult and tough sometimes.
And Colleen, we can't talk about women and powerful women without mentioning Patsy Mink, of course, and everything that she has done for us with Title IX. And what kind of things are you doing, with the Center for Business and Leadership, and how can we further commemorate what she's done and talk about the anniversary of Title IX as well?
Right. I think that, starting with the way our center was originally named, our CEO, Noriko Namiki at YWCA Oahu, she asked Wendy Mink if we could name the Women's Business Center after her mother. And she said that, she would be honored to have that happen as long as it had leadership attached to the name. So that's why it is a long mouthful. It's Patsy T. Mink Center for Business and Leadership. But that was women's leadership was such a fundamental core focus of Patsy Mink's that she wanted to make sure that she was represented in that way as well. I think that our center definitely is focused on lifting women entrepreneurs and women leaders. So we have programs that are focused on supporting them in that journey. And it's such an honor to be able to work somewhere that is named after Patsy Mink, for sure. I think we're still trying to reach the full capacity that Title IX was originally established to create, or the just, you know, what its intent was. I think we're still trying to get there.
Maybe the word you're thinking of is potential.
Thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate that. Yes, we are trying to. I'm sure for what she intended it to be, we're not quite there yet, but we're getting there. And I think our center certainly is, you know, for our leadership programs, our one of our goals as a women's business center is to increase the number of women executives in our community. We want to see more women in the C-suite. We want to see more women leaders directing and leading. So we are, you know, we're working all the time towards that. We have 108 alumni in our women's leadership program. So we focused on helping to lift them.
Wonderful. And Youngchee, what does the American Association of University Women of Hawaii do?
So AAUW of Hawaii, we are a state chapter of a national organization. In Hawaii, we have been around since 1905. It was started by few women who did have a college degree who wanted to encourage and enable other women to go to college. So we really started as a club that gave scholarships. And we still do that. But in addition to that, we give out grants to individuals to develop their career as well as leadership, the leadership world there. And from my perspective, I do the public policy. So we work on equal pay, Title IX, workplace harassment, state laws like that is going to remove the systematic barriers that get in the way of advancement for women, whether we are talking about education or career. So that's what we do. We are also all volunteer organization, membership organization, that's all volunteer.
Okay. And also a nonprofit, Healthy Mothers, Healthy Babies. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so what would you describe as far as your services? I know it's essentially about moms and babies, but you provide so much more.
Absolutely, so much more. Really, we, you know, our aim is to just kind of wrap people around in our services. So we recently we've started a kind of clinical portion to our care. So where we're actually, you know, we have a doula program now where we're supporting people birthing in hospitals and just giving them support, which was really important in the midst of COVID when there were people at one point where they couldn't even have their partners in the hospital with them. So really being there as advocates for mothers and birthing people to let them know what their rights are, letting them know, you know, that they're autonomous and their bodies are theirs and that they have the right to get the, you know, the kind of care they want. But also with that, like in the midst of, you know, COVID, you know, we had a food program where we were delivering, you know, a week's worth of meals to, you know, pregnant and postpartum moms to make sure that they were getting the nutrients they need. So really just, you know, thinking of all the portions of care that, you know, someone who's pregnant or birthing or has small children needs in order to really create like a community and village around them, because so many people don't have that. And especially in COVID where, you know, people's families weren't able to get with them. And, you know, in Hawaii, you know, people live really intergenerationally. So making sure not only taking care of the pregnant and birthing person, but we're taking care of the entire family to make sure that they have what they need. So anywhere from diaper service to food delivery, to lactation services, doing childbirth education, really just trying to educate, empower, and helping people advocate for what they need.
And a question that I have for the entire panel, and someone can jump in whenever they feel comfortable, is, did you ever feel that you were discriminated against because you were a woman?
As we all giggle, right?
Yeah.
Yes. I'll go first. Not only as a woman, but as a Black woman in particular. And I think there's, you know, it's importance to that specificity. Just, you know, the history of the United States and how it was formed and how it's created, you know, off of the backs of Black women and their birthing and their labor and their actual physical labor of work. And I think it just kind of lays the foundation for how we treat Black women, how we treat women in general, how we treat women of color. So every room that I move into most of the time, you know, in these spaces, I'm sometimes the only Black woman, sometimes the only woman of color, and having to sit in that space and having to advocate, having to use my voice, having to deal with gaslighting and microaggressions and all the things, you know, not just from men, but, you know, to be frank, white women as well, right? So having to fight multiple battles, you know, multiple intersectionalities of that fight. So I mean, I could sit and do a TED talk on all the discrimination, anti-Blackness, and racism that I encounter on a daily basis, but we're still here, right? You know, Black women, you know, people oftentimes look at Black women as, you know, the ones who are going to save this country, you know, save the election, you know, we're saving, you know, the United States from ourselves, right? And all the things. So, you know, it's just one of those things where, I know it. When I step into a room, I know I have to kind of wear this kind of armor and be prepared for what's to come. But we still fight the good fight every day.
And Youngchee, I would imagine, you know, working at IBM, that may have been quite challenging as well.
I would have to say my first, I tell people that I became a feminist at age 5 because there was a personal discrimination from my grandmother with my brother. It had to do with 5 candies. So you get the picture. And I was 5, he was 8. But that's when I became aware of social biases against women. Some are internalized, and thus the point that Tanya made, and some are not. And from systematic barrier perspective, definitely. By the time, because I studied computer science in college, and I think there were 2 other women in my class, and there were 50 total studying computer science. So we were not even 10% when I was going to school there. So frankly, I got used to being the only non-white, only woman throughout college. So by the time I got to IBM, frankly, I didn't notice it. And as I mentioned earlier, it was when I was 25, my manager called me bossy broad, because I was suggesting something about a project. I had opinion as a software developer, and that made me bossy broad. So that was like first encounter on it. But what was great about IBM is that they took action. And he's no longer a manager, right? So I, at the same time, felt very, very empowered. I feel very lucky that was my first encounter to sexual harassment at workplace, that it happened, but it got taken care of. So there is that side of IBM as well. So on one hand, you get really used to being one of the few, and you have to battle through it. On the other hand, systematically, there are policies that business had that took care of the situation. So in some ways, I think that's what led me to work on public policy, because we need both. We need business organization policies, but also public policies.
And Colleen?
You know, I have to say, to be transparent and honest, that I have not had to deal with too much of the discrimination, racism in my life. I would say I'm privileged to be able to say that, unfortunately, for all of you. But that's the case for me.
I appreciate that. And speaking from the heart, from my personal perspective, I would say I have seen it personally. But one thing that really hits home for me is when I reflect on my career in particular, I did feel discriminated against by other women. if that makes any sense, right? And so, you know, obviously this empower women is very deep for me personally. And so ʻIhilani, would you also agree to that?
Absolutely. And I think the saying like that women empower women couldn't be more true. But I think oftentimes it's becoming more popular or more commonplace for women and girls and men and non-binary people as well to identify as feminists. But oftentimes the roots or the history of feminism get overlooked, so much so that we think that feminism or women's empowerment is just being equal to men. So women empowerment is looking like having more women CEOs, having more women in the military, when actuality we should really be thinking about what women's liberation looks like on a broader sense and what women need to be successful and to be fulfilled. That's not necessarily related or equal to being the same as our male counterparts. But going back to feeling discriminated against, whether it's the basis of race or sexism, as a student at the University of Hawaii, especially being Kanaka Maoli, this is very, very true. In one way, the university wants to be a Hawaiian place of learning and an indigenous serving institution, but oftentimes Kanaka Maoli and especially Kanaka Wahine are met with discrimination and sexism when trying to voice our concerns about what that actually looks like. So yeah, it's very real. It's very unique for Native women because we're battling not just settler colonialism, but we're also battling struggles within our own Lahui or Hawaiian nation with patriarchy. So there's a lot of different angles to take this. And women in Hawaii are facing these struggles, but Native women especially.
Thank you. And we are starting to get some comments on Facebook and via email. The first is each county in Hawaii has elected a woman mayor. Maui did it twice. And we have had a woman governor. Does that put Hawaii ahead of the game, or are we falling short in other ones like the private sector? Eric from Kailua. Do you ladies foresee that maybe we could have another woman governor, or, you know, with the election coming up, there are some women running for like lieutenant governor. What are your thoughts about that?
I think it's important, you know, and I think ʻIhilani, you know, kind of, you know, touched on this. It's not just about having women in places, right? It's, you know, women on boards and women, you know, in, you know, the C-suite and all of these things, right? It's about like their ethics and their philosophy, right? We can have women in places and they're not necessarily the best thing for women, right? They're not necessarily, you know, they can, lots of times women can, you know, can move like men, you know, and can move like white men in particular, you know, and be extremely harmful. And we have to look at, you know, is it tokenism? Is it just that we want any woman in a seat so we can say like, oh, okay, we're equal to men? Or is it important for us to look at, you know, what the politics are, look at, you know, what they represent, look at, you know, if they're really, you know, about, you know, community work and about community. So, I mean, it's great that, you know, each county has elected a woman. Of course, you know, we should want more, but, you know, also we need to think about, you know, are we electing the type of women who really represent, you know, the ethics and philosophies and the policies that we really need to move the needle forward for all of us.
We also have another comment or question on Facebook. Kelvin asks, it's 50 years since Patsy, Mink, Equal Opportunity and Education Act. How can lawmakers amend that act to benefit women in the next 50 years?
So I will chime in. So those are 37 words. In preparation for this discussion, I was actually just thinking through Patsy Mink as a person and a leader and change maker, but also what Title IX has done, right? So it didn't take long to figure out that I obviously benefited from it because just let me, before Title IX, so that's 1972, only 8% of STEM, so that's science, technology, engineering, math, workers were women. We're not at 50% yet. 48% of the workers are women, and we are far from 48%. It's 27, but it grew from 8 to 27, and I am a beneficiary of it. And that whole thing about girls can't do math, remember? There's the girls cannot, you run like a girl, and then there's girls cannot do math, right? Totally wrong. In fact, it was my dad who thought I should go into computer science because I was good with math. So I never doubted that. But the notion of that, we still have a lot of work to do because it's these biases, like girls can't do math. That's despite of Title IX and despite of all the efforts, we are only at 27%. We should be at 48% because 48% of workforce are women. So we have made progress, 8 to 27. We got a lot more to go, 21%, maybe even 25% more to go. Why does this matter? Because girls are good with math. And if they want to do something with math, if they want to be physicists, they should be able to do so. I have actually met a lot of undergrad students who will start as a science or engineering major, and then they drop out second year. And the common thread was they thought they are not good with whatever they want to study. And that's not true. So I think there's something we need to do with Title IX as a state law to look for these things and enhance it, but also things we could do to remove these biases, whether it's internalized or whether it's externalized.
Okay. Colleen, did you want to piggyback on that at all regarding the Patsy Mink Equal Opportunity in Education Act?
Right. I think that so much of it is focused on the sports and what Title IX has done there, which is great. You know, I think that's great that women have more opportunities in sports now. But I think that translating that across the board, the way Youngchee's talking about, I do think I'm sitting here racking my brain thinking, okay, what could we do to change Title IX to make it different, or to, to edit it for the next 20 years in order to enhance what it can do for women. And it's just making those opportunities available, like Youngchee's saying, not having those biases. It's making sure that women are able to, and it's interesting because this is kind of off the subject, but listening to Tanya and ʻIhilani speak about how, our focus on lifting women and their futures and not necessarily focusing on them getting to the C-suite or that exec level comparable to what men's, what their level of sorry, I'm having a hard time articulating, what success looks like to them, that we don't necessarily have to compare ourselves to that. And, that was fantastic. I loved hearing that. It's not a new concept, obviously, but that just kind of lit a spark in my brain going, wow, that is so, so true, that our success doesn't have to match what that is. And that's something that's really giving me food for thought in just right now in my programming. So just hearing that discussion was very fruitful for me.
So let me add to from just a pure law perspective, one more that could be done. So for example, I don't know if, I think some of you probably know that in 2018, Hawaii passed Title IX state law to protect LGBTQ students under Hawaii state Title IX law. And we are the very first to do so in the nation, right? So I feel very proud and honored because I felt like we are still carrying on Patsy Mink's work, right? because there is still things that we are discovering. Like Colleen said, it started with getting rid of you run like girl bias, right? Girls don't want to go into sports. Girls are not good in sports, and it started with that. It has gone way beyond that, and we are going to continuously discover new gender-based discriminations, whether it's LGBT or sexual harassment that prevents so many PhD students from graduating, right? And so on. So I think there's still a lot of work to be done as we discover more under that 37 words that she created. So I have no doubt that we have plenty of work to do next 50 years.
Well, I think
and one day I have no doubt that we're going to get to a point where we have more than half of STEM workers being women, not just because STEM workers make more money, but because girls are good with math.
Mhm.
So
I think you hit the nail on the head. And, talking a little bit more inclusively, we did have a comment in regards to trans women and being discussed, talking about birthing and being a mother. And so I think this is more so directed to Tanya. Does Healthy Babies, Healthy Mothers also provide assistance for trans women, or maybe perhaps same-sex couples? Or are you more inclusive of the LGBTQ community?
We absolutely do. So that's why in my speech, in my language, I always say mother and birthing people, to acknowledge that everyone doesn't identify as a woman, that everyone doesn't necessarily identify as a mother, but to include, people as, people who are birthing. So, and absolutely, Healthy Mothers, Healthy Babies, our staff of nurses, and we have a nurse practitioner and midwives, to where we're inclusive of everyone who wants our services. We are, determined to make sure that, that people feel like that they have a care provider that can see and hear them and take care of them in all the ways. So we welcome people to come to us for services. We welcome, the questions. We welcome them to feel like there's someplace they can go where they'll get cared for, where they'll be seen and heard in those ways. So come on to Healthy Mothers, Healthy Babies if you want that level of care. Absolutely.
Thank you for the clarification. All right, La'akea from Maui has a question for ʻIhilani. Who are some of the kumu wahine female professors and ho'apapa wahine female classmates at UH who inspire your work today, and how?
Aloha e La'akea, mahalo pia ʻoe no keia minau mai kaʻi. So thanks La'akea for that great question. I've been so lucky to have had so many amazing wahine at the university who are just brilliant kumu. And I'm really lucky to be in a generation of Hawaiian scholars where we have a lot of kumu at the University of Hawaii. And so I know I won't be able to name all of them, but a few folks who have been absolutely fundamental to me and my growth and this academic genealogy, as Kumuhanani K. Trask would call it, in this ways of being slightly reproductive, are without a doubt Kumu Noelani Goodyear Kaupua. She's a brilliant Native Hawaiian professor in political science. Kumu Kokunawai Wright, who's a professor in the College of Ed. Dr. Noinoi Silva, another brilliant and amazing professor in political science, who helped to find or rediscover the Ku'e petitions, which has been fundamental to the Hawaiian sovereignty movement. Hioli Osorio, who is also another amazing professor in political science, although they teach in a lot of different disciplines. And someone who's been an amazing kumu for me as an artist and as someone who's queer is Dr. No'ukaho Oliver-Villa. So all brilliant wahine scholars who have really invested themselves in their academic work, but I think as equally as important, they've really invested themselves into their community. So as someone who is Kanaka at the university, the understanding that what we do in our scholarly work shouldn't just exist in the realm of academia, but it has to help or uplift our larger community is something that I've learned from all of them. And yeah, those weren't all of the names. I wish I could get to all of them, but these people have been extremely fundamental to my growth. So mahalo to them and mahalo La'akea for such a great question. These wahine are amazing. Look them up. They all have books and it's awesome.
I'm curious what your goals are after you graduate.
Me too. No, this is a good question. I do have an answer. So I guess a little bit of background knowledge or background context from my academic experience. So I recently graduated from the University of Hawaii in the spring of 21 with my bachelor's in ethnic studies with a minor in political science and a certificate in women's gender and sexuality studies. But I was also part of this program called BAM, which stands for Bachelor's and Master's. So in the spring of my senior year, I started my master's in education administration, higher education. I'll be finishing that up in the spring. And as of last week, I've officially accepted an offer from the University of Hawaii to pursue my doctorate in political science and specifically within Indigenous politics with funding. And I know that last part really helps a lot. So in the fall, I'll be pursuing or beginning my doctorate degree and also teaching at the university.
Wow.
Congratulations.
That's fantastic. So Colleen, I wanted to chat a little bit about what kind of services you provide for women in business, if they're seeking to open their own business or if they already are business owners. Can you kind of elaborate more on that?
Of course, definitely. Yes, as a women's business center, one of over 144 across the country, but as you said earlier, the only one in Hawaii, we offer free one-on-one business and legal counseling to beginning pre-start entrepreneurs and small businesses. And we offer workshops and courses on how to start your business, how to grow your business. It's wonderful to see the passion of entrepreneurs and small business owners, but a lot of them have a fantastic idea or create an amazing product, but they don't necessarily have that business acumen that they need to run a business. So we'd like to provide a lot of that, whether it's marketing, working on their financials, how their financials should be laid out, QuickBooks, working on social media. We have a course on how to get online via building your own Shopify website, just supporting any way we can, especially now after COVID. It's so important for our small businesses to have an online presence as well, too, to make sure that they're reaching their customer, their target customer. But we are focused on helping women own their own small business, and we do women-owned small business roundtables quarterly, focused on the Scent platform, which was created by the Small Business Administration to specifically help women own small businesses, create a business plan, and get funding. And then for our leadership side, solely focused on women leaders, we have our Patsy Teammate Leadership Alliance, which is for mid-career women looking to increase their leadership capacity. It's a 10-month, 100-hour walk program, 20 women per cohort, and they are facilitated by current women leaders and executives in our community. So it's really a wonderful networking opportunity and relationship building cohort, as well as educating on leadership skills. But we also have once we started that, we're on our cohort 6, our 6th year of that program. We started our Wahine Rising program, which is for beginning women leaders, which we found was so necessary for those women starting their leadership and management journey, and getting support on what they want their career path to look like, how they want to be seen as leaders, or how they want to be as a woman leader. So that's a shorter cohort, but we have gotten a lot of traction in that program. So really excited.
Excellent.
And then we also have a girls program as well.
Fantastic. Thank you. We have a question from Helen on Facebook. I'm going to direct this to you, Tanya. If you had to take one action at the state level to make a difference in the lives of women in Hawaii, what would that one be? And she gave some examples: law, policy, protest, study, anything, ?
Oh, because that's part of the work I do as policy director. So I'm always thinking about policies in regards to mothers and caregivers and those who are, who are taking care of littles, right? So definitely one of the things of us thinking about childcare better and how, as we're talking about, gender equity and getting women into the workforce, we need to start thinking about those who take care of the keiki. And, especially I think that got elucidated during COVID, seeing so many people coming, having to come home from the workforce and thinking about what do we do with our children? Who is teaching them? Who's watching them? How can we do this at the same time? And I think that's, that was like a turning point, I feel like, for us to think like, wow, like this is what mothers and people who are parenting do all the time. They're working and they're, caring for the home and caring for children. So policies around that, thinking about how can we structure society and our, communities better to where we're being supportive of families, those who are trying to, work outside the home, make money at a pay that they can actually live, right? So thinking about all of those things, thinking about, maternal mental health and maternal health in general, because Hawaii does an awful job at it, to be honest, especially when it comes to Native Hawaiian, Black, Micronesian, Pacific Islander folks in Hawaii. Like there's no excuse for it. Why, white women, who are not the majority in Hawaii, but, their care is, 2, 3, 4 times better than, the communities that I named, right? So thinking about what is behind that, we know it's implicit bias and racism. So how do we change that? How do we change the ways in which people are being cared for and treated, not just in Hawaii, but just across the board, right? And thinking about once we can tackle those things, then we can start thinking about like, okay, how do we, level the playing field? How do we make, things to where they're more equal? So always for me on a policy front, I'm pushing, legislation that supports those efforts. Particularly one of the ones was around implicit bias in data collection, just getting the information and knowing what is happening to people on the ground, what are happening to communities that we don't see and hear from, who don't have representation. And, yeah, so if there's any ways we could, uplift policy and specifically legislation in those regards, I think we can make huge differences. But it's a fight, just like, every session, every year we bring these kinds of things to the fore and they die, because, I don't know. I hate to say that people don't care about it, but, the reality is that they never make it through to actually become laws. So I'm always fighting that fight. I come back every year with a new bill or a new policy or a new update to figure out how can we do this better and get the people who can make those decisions to care about it enough to do something.
And I guess a proactive approach would be if there are laws that are relevant to you that you would like changed, or to push them forward to submit written testimony, to lend your support of those bills. So Youngchee, one of the things that the AAUW researches is the pay gap between men and women. And where does that stand right now?
So thank you for asking that question, because as Tanya was speaking about pay gap, I was thinking about that. It's there is a coalition called National Committee on Pay Equity. It's AAUW is a member that's been tracking gender pay gap since 1960. So in 1960, it was a little short of 60%. Was what collective full-time women workers made compared to white men collective, the total number. So that's 40% gap, right? We are sitting at 83% based on 2020 data, not 2021, but 2020 data, full year. Interestingly, when you peel we decided that this year, using a 2020 data, that we're gonna change the methodology, because during, I think it was Tanya who mentioned it, during pandemic, as you all know, many women are forced out of workforce, either because they were in service jobs or retail jobs or restaurant jobs, something we are very familiar with here with tourism, or because of childcare. They had to stay home. And many had to drop out of full-time, working full-time to part-time. So all of a sudden, measuring based on full-time workers just doesn't look right. So we had to change it, change the methodology to include everyone. And boy, the numbers just came out. It looks really, really bad for women of color across all women of color compared to the number from 2019, which was based on full-time workers. So this is actually introducing a new challenge for us to look and say, okay, what is this telling us, right? Because you cannot just work on equal pay law using the structure that existed before. Now we have to look at what are we doing to enable working mothers to continue to work? What do they really need? Childcare, flex hours. I think we know the answer to all this. And they have to be coordinated and integrated into a solution. You cannot do piecemealing because then it's not solving anybody's problem. So I think we have some real conversation to be had because this number looks really bad.
Colleen, what kind of things are you hearing from women that come to see you for assistance?
Oh, childcare is always an issue. So, you know, if I have a counseling set, since COVID, we've been doing our counseling remotely, obviously, but before that, we would have women come in. They would want one-on-one business counseling. You know, they bring their baby in their stroller. They bring a toddler with them. I mean, you want to be able to provide your service to them as much as possible and accommodate them as well, because what are they going to do? Otherwise, they couldn't come in and receive the services they needed to start or grow their business. So it's definitely, and even across our cohorts, our leadership cohorts and our small business cohorts, we've seen that a high percentage of the women have had to either stop working, or they did have to back off the number of hours just in order to take care of their kids, help their kids with school during the pandemic, for sure.
And I did want to clarify, your organization provides assistance for all genders, right?
Oh yes, definitely. Even though we're a women's business center, we help 80% of our clients are women, but 20% are men, yes.
Okay.
And across the board.
And Tanya, are you also seeing struggles and triumphs from women that have to do with healthcare and also childcare, you know, for women that are seeing you?
Absolutely. And one of the beautiful things that came out of the pandemic was, you know, just this kind of data collection and asking, like, you know, people who are birthing, especially people who didn't have support, like, what's happening to you on the ground? Like, what do you need? What is happening? And of course, the same things are coming up. Like, I can't go see my doctor because I can't bring my child and I don't have anyone to take care of them. So how am I going to even get, you know, my prenatal or postpartum care? Thinking about, and I want to piggyback off of, you know, what Colleen said, one of the things, you know, the things that's going unspoken is that, you know, women are the ones who are doing most of the child rearing and child caring, right? Even during COVID, when everybody is back at home, men and women, it's still, you know, the unpaid labor of parenting and mothering is falling on women, you know, so, you know, the partners and the husbands and the spouses who are there, they're seeing all this extra labor happening and they're like, oh my goodness, like that's what you've been doing all this time when I'm out of the house doing the work, and seeing how much work it is, but it's still all falling on women. So those are the conversations we don't have, right, when we're talking about equity. And that's where it needs to start, like this kind of equity within the home, like who's doing most of the labor at home, who's doing most of the child care, who's doing most of the child rearing, thinking about all those things. We don't see men, you know, sitting thinking about, you know, taking the children to their appointments that they have, you know, and leaving that to, you know, to mothers. So we saw that all the time. So we had to restructure the ways in which, you know, we did things too, you know, thinking about, you know, how do we reach people who can't get to us? So we, you know, we created a mobile midwifery clinic where we went to people, you know, we took our van out there, you know, drove to, you know, someone's house or apartment. Bring your baby if you need to, come to the van to get seen. We will meet you where you're at. And I think that's a lot of what, you know, what's having to happen now, like meeting people where are they at? What are the needs? What do people need? What do they want? How can we make things better for people, and figuring out what that is and doing that. So it's definitely been a huge shift. And I think one of the things, I keep saying, during COVID, one of the beautiful things, but one of the things that has opened our eyes up is like all the unpaid work and labor of caretaking, mothering, caring for for our elders. Someone has to do that work. And then when we saw, so many women having to come home and not being able to work, who does that work fall on? And who's getting paid for it? And who are we not paying? So I think we started to have the conversations about paying teachers more, because we realized how much work it was when we had to, homeschool the kids all of a sudden. The same thing about, childcare providers. Now we're having these conversations about what are we going to do about childcare, because those people deserve to be paid a living wage, because, we're doing the work and seeing how much work it really is. So I think, if we really want to sit and do this right, thinking about all of those things as we move policies forward, as we think about legislation, and how do we make this better on the ground, and and employers too, thinking about how can I make my workspace and the workforce work better for me by taking care of all of these things.
All right, thank you. And ʻIhilani, I see you nodding your head, and obviously you're from the education background and over at the university. What kind of things have you seen as well?
A lot of what everyone said really resonated with me. And so reflecting on a question that I think a viewer had about there being more women politicians, I think to flip that question on its head a little bit, the metric of how well we're going to be doing as people of Hawaii is how well we support women who are in the home. And like Tanya said, and like so many others have said, women are doing a majority of this care work. And it hasn't been since COVID, but it's been for generations due to capitalism and patriarchy. And there's an article that I can't cite at this particular moment, but there's this amazing feminist scholar who calculated all of the work that women did in the household as if it were a part of America's GDP. And women contribute immensely in the terms of reproductive labor, like in the home and with child rearing. So thinking about how if we want to excel as a people, we have to malama our wahine, our mothers, and our birthing people, because those are the foundations of our communities. And I would also be remiss to not include the fact that teachers spend a lot of time with our haumana, or with our keiki, I should say. And the fact that a lot of teachers in Hawaii are through programs where educators are outsourced and brought in from the continent or elsewhere, thinking about how if we really want to invest in our communities, one, it starts at home and acknowledging the work that many wahine do, but it's also acknowledging that so many of the folks in our community are within the DOE K-12 system, and the educators need to be compensated in the way that they deserve. And the way that we invest in education needs to be rethought and reinvented in ways. And I'll chime on this really briefly. So as a state, we've divested from education, and this is seen across the board, where we're not paying teachers enough, or we're defunding programs. And I think a large part of that is folks in the legislature, whether in the House or the state, they want to see an immediate return on investment. But the fact is that we need to invest in our communities and in our teachers and in our students if we want to build a stronger foundation of how we're going to move forward. So I guess the two ways that I re-envision a stronger Hawaii for not just women, but all peoples, is acknowledging the care work that women and birthing people do in the home, and acknowledging the fact that our teachers, our kumu, are so much of the foundation of our community, and we really need to shift. And I can't overemphasize this enough. Shift and emphasize the work that our teachers do, and shift our priorities as a state to really uplift our teachers, especially now when they've been doing a lot of care work along with teaching.
And just to piggyback off of that really quickly, that article that ʻIhilani is citing, as we're talking about, women moving into the C-suite and all these things, actually the amount that a woman, if we really added it all up, is the equivalent of a CEO. So it would be over, it'll be over $700,000 if you add up the cooking and the cleaning and the, all of the roles that if someone had to hire those people out to do the things, it would be CEO pay. So thinking about that, and if we really want to, to do this right, actually, putting money into the places to where, where it would make the most payout, childcare, our teachers, our caregivers. And that's central to a community, right? If we don't take care of those people, what are we doing?
Excellent. Well, thank you, ladies, so much for bringing up some wonderful discussion points. Also want to thank our viewers for participating in the discussion tonight. And so thank you so much. And also want to mention, if you do need assistance, Healthy Mothers, Healthy Babies is a nonprofit available, and the Patsy Mink Center for Business and Leadership also providing assistance, and Youngchee with the American Association of University Women of Hawaii, and ʻIhilani, who is going to be making waves as an amazing educator and doing great things. So thank you, ladies, all for joining us this evening. And so Tanya Smith, thank you. She is from Healthy Mothers, Healthy Babies Coalition of Hawaii. From the Patsy Mink Center for Business and Leadership, Colleen Mcaluney. And Youngchee Overly with the American Association of University Women of Hawaii. And Mānoa graduate student ʻIhilani Lasconia. Thank you each for joining us this evening. Now, coming up next week on Insights, illegal fireworks. Now, they tend to go off around New Year's, but they also go off year-round, right? Aerials continue to blow throughout the entire year, rattling residents and pets. We're asking if anything can be done to crack down on illegal fireworks. You can join us then. That's next week, Thursday, right here. I'm Elena Hugh for Insights on PBS Hawaii. Aloha and ahoy ho.